joy, joy of my desire. All consuming fire, all right, you are my joy, my desire. Hey, all consuming fire, you are my joy, my peace, my strength, yeah. All consuming fire, all consuming fire. Come on, lift your hands.
Shalom everyone, this is Judaiah. So I made this video to answer the age-old question, to tithe or not to tithe. It just seems like the question keeps popping up and it never quite gets answered. So this video will answer it. Now you may or may not like the answer, especially if you're one of those pastors living off of your tithes. It's a controversial answer, but I can assure you it is biblical. Now, you may have seen my video, Tithing in a Nutshell. That's just a 6-minute quick video for those of you who want a quick answer. But this video is well overdue. It's a little longer because I want to go a little deeper into the tithing doctrine, whether or not it applies today, whether or not it applies to the Christian church, and most importantly, who's entitled to collect it? What's the purpose of it? And you'll see that this is the main determining factor, the purpose of the tithe, and who can collect it. So let me start off by saying this. To you pastors out there collecting tithes from your people, it is not okay for you to take the tithing doctrine and make it what you want it to be. It's an abomination to capitalize off of the laws and commandments, twist them and teach them to unlearned followers for your own benefit. Then go and buy $1 million houses and $100,000 cars and jets and stay in expensive hotels, get yourself on TV with their money to gain more followers and to do the same to them. Those who are brainwashed under you, they can't see it, but I see right through you. When the Bible says, will a man rob God? It was referring to you. Because if you're taking and collecting tithes that you're not authorized to collect and using it for purposes the Most High did not ordain them for, you are the one robbing him, not your followers. You're the one held accountable in the end for misguiding your followers and teaching them in error. So I'll try to sum this up as quickly as possible with scripture to back it up, because I want you to have a full understanding, and most importantly, I want you to be able to teach this as well. So get your pen and your pad ready. Some of you know I grew up in a Christian church, so I've heard it all. I've heard at least 2 pastors claim that the tithe is really supposed to be 30%, not 10%. 10% is the bare minimum you're supposed to give them. So let's take a look at that. Now, the Israelites did pay 3 separate 10% tithes, totaling 30%. Let's start with the first tithe that they paid. It was called the Levitical tithe. The Levitical tithe. Okay? The Levitical tithe was solely for the children of Levi, the Levites. They didn't have an inheritance, so they worked in the temple for a salary. When the 12 tribes of Israel gave 10% of their increase for this tithe, it went to the Levites as a salary. If you go to Numbers 18, verse 21, it reads, I have given the children of Levi all the 10th in Israel for an inheritance, for their service which they serve, even the service of the tabernacle of the congregation. So the key words here are, I give to the children of Eli. This means the Levitical tithe is for the Levites only, and I stress only for the Levites, period. Whether you live in Israel, America, Germany, it doesn't matter. It's only for the Levites. Next key words you need to look at are for their service which they serve in the tabernacle. For their service which they serve. Okay? When you receive something in return for your work, it's a salary. So the Levitical tithe was their pay, their salary. So in Numbers 18:21, we clearly see that the Levitical tithe is, number 1, only for the Levites. Number 2, It was their salary. Nowhere do we see a church or a pastor collecting this. It was only for Levites, not teachers, not pastors, and not church leaders. Now, there was a sub-tithe in this Levitical tithe. It was called a heave offering. When the Levites collected their pay, they were to in turn offer 10% of that to the priest as a heave offering. If you look at Numbers chapter 18, verse 26, it says, "Speak to the Levites and say to them, when you take the tithes from the children of Israel, which I've given you as an inheritance, offer up a heave offering of it for the Most High, a tenth of the tenth." And verse 28 says, the heave offering went to the priest. And if you go on over to Exodus chapter 29, verse 28, it's talking about the sanctity of the heave offering. It says, "It shall be Aaron's and his sons forever from the children of Israel, for it is a heave offering." So heave offerings were not just given to anyone. They were only given to priests. Okay, so let's look at this layout. The 12 tribes paid 10% to the Levites for their salary. Then the Levites gave 10% of that as a heave offering to the priest. So actually 1% of what the 12 tribes paid ended up with the priest. So if I give you 10% and then you give 10% of that to someone, 1% of what I gave you ended up with them. So does that mean we're to pay 1% to a preacher? No. Let's be clear. Look at the parties involved here. Only the Levites could collect the Levitical tithe. Only a priest could collect the heave offering from them. I've heard preachers trying to collect a heave offering from their church members. If you are not a priest, you're not authorized to collect this, nor have they received a salary as Levites to be giving you a heave offering from. Okay? If you're teaching your people to pay you a Levitical tithe, you're teaching in error. They are not Levites working in the temple. Neither the Levitical tithe or the heave offering can be kept by scattered Israel today. You must be a Levite to collect the Levitical tithe. If you're a pastor, can you say that you're a Levite? If you claim to be a Levite, are you working in the temple? Not a temple, the temple. Not some building you're leasing and decided to call a temple. The temple. There's only one, and it no longer exists. Understand this. It's not about what they tithe, food or spices or coin. It's about who they were and who they tithe to. Remember that. The Levitical tithe was paid as a salary only to the Levites. To you churchgoers out there, if there's no Levite before you who is working in the temple, there is no one to pay this tithe to. To you pastors, if you're not a Levite, you cannot collect this tithe. As for the heave offering, churchgoers, if you're not a Levite, you can't pay this. Pastors, if you're not a priest, you can't collect this. Again, it's about who you are and who you're paying it to. So let's move on to the second tithe. It's called the festival tithe. Now, we've said the Levitical tithe was specifically for Levites as a salary for their work. The festival tithe has a specific purpose as well. It was purposed to sustain the Israelites during their stay in Jerusalem for the 3 pilgrimage festivals. If you go over to Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 22 through 25, it says, "You shall truly tithe all of the increase of thy seed." Verse 23 says, "And you shall eat before the Most High in the place which he shall choose to place his name there." And verse 24 says, "And if the way be too long for thee, so that you are not able to carry it, or if the place is too far," and it says, "turn it into coin and bind it up and take it to the place." Okay, now the key words here are eat the tithe. Eat the tithe. This means the festival tithe was for you. The Israelites were not commanded to give this away. The second key words are to the place the Most High chooses. The temple in Jerusalem was that place he chose, and he put his name on it. And they traveled near and far to meet at that temple, the temple. But for those who live too far away, verse 24 through 25 says to exchange their items for coin, so they'll be easier to carry. And verse 26 says, and use that money for whatsoever your soul desires, cattle, sheep, wine, strong drink, whatever you wish. And it says to rejoice. They were commanded to eat it in the presence of the Most High. And if a Levite be around them that was in need, to share with them because they had no inheritance. Okay, so for those of you who claim that there was no coin back in the day, Deuteronomy 14:25 confirms that there was. So let me debunk that argument right now. Okay, so the festival tithe was to sustain the Israelites for their travel. It's the equivalent of setting aside money in a savings account for a vacation at the end of the year. You'll need money for a hotel, a rental car, food, etc. So the Most High was telling them to set aside 10% to ensure that they made it to the 3 festivals in Jerusalem and could maintain while there. Okay? It's simple. So again, no pastor can collect this from you. You're not even commanded to give it away. Now, it says if a Levite is in need, do not neglect them. Outside of that, it belongs to you. In terms of today's scattered Israelites, obviously, we're not traveling to Jerusalem for the Passover, for the Feast of Weeks, or the Feast of Tabernacles. There's no temple there. So some of us celebrate at local synagogues. But remember, your synagogue is not the temple, number one. Number two, they were commanded to consume it in Jerusalem, where the Most High chose. Number three, the festival tithe was not to be given away anyway. Even if you celebrate the feast at a local Israelite synagogue, this tithe was to be consumed by you. So the festival tithe can't be kept by scattered Israel. So far we've covered the first Levitical tithe, 10%, which was for the Levites only as a salary for working in the temple. Note, paid to Levites and received by Levites only. And we've covered the heave offering, which Levites in turn gave 10% from their pay to the priest only. Note, paid by Levites and received by priests only. Okay, remember, it's about who paid it and who they paid it to. This tithe can no longer be kept because we don't know who or where the Levites are. And even if you find one, they're not working in the temple because the temple doesn't exist anymore. All right, we've covered the second festival tithe, 10%, which simply was putting aside necessities for their travels to Jerusalem. Again, we're scattered. We're not traveling to the temple because it doesn't exist. Even if it did exist and we traveled to it, this tithe remained in the pockets of the Israelites. It was never given away. Now, the third and final tithe is what's called the poor man's tithe. The poor man's tithe is 10% as well. This is the most important of the three because it's the one of the 3 tithes that can still be kept.
He is my joy, joy of my desire, all consuming.